All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this first of a three-series webinar on what we've entitled "The Six Assassins: The Stages of a Cyber Attack," and how you can prevent yourself from being a victim of these stages. We greatly appreciate all of you that signed up and came to us for this course of events, and really appreciate you all. And we're hoping that you stay with us for the other two seminars or join in for the other two webinars. Just a little bit of housekeeping. I'd like you all to know that the session is being recorded, and that's for your benefit as well, so that you'll be able to look and review the material, because there's going to be a lot of material that's going to be shared in a rather compact time frame. Microphones and videos will be kept off for the duration of the presentation, and then we can, after the presentation, we'll have questions fielded in the chat. We'll have questions fielded in the chat during the presentation. We'll pause for certain times to answer those questions. There will also be a Q&A session, an open Q&A session, where mics will be opened at the end of the presentation. Just so that you'll get a little bit of idea of Icons Company Limited, I don't think we have some existing customers who've been with us for a while, and there may be some that are not aware of Icons. Let me just give you all a brief overview of our company. Let me know when you see the screen.
Good to go talk on.
Okay. All right, thanks, Chuck. So we're Icons Company Limited. This name is actually a doing business as name. I don't know how many can remember or know our full name, but it's Integrated Computing and Outsourcing Network Solutions. Icons in brackets there, Company Limited. It's quite a mouthful, and it's difficult to write down. I'll tell you to write down on a piece of paper, but it's a name that we've come to love, and I think our customers appreciate it as well. Just so you know who we are an IT solutions provider and integrator. We began operations in 2006. The company was actually incorporated in 2005. So we've been in business for 18 years this year. So we're not a new kid on the block. We initially focused or catered for the SMB market, but some of what we were offering, we realized, is also extendable to larger enterprises. And indeed, we do have several larger enterprises that are our customers. So we're not specifically focused on any group of companies. What we offer and what the services we provide can span the range of companies, company sizes. And we focused primarily on core IT infrastructure. It's the backbone of your IT systems, and ensuring that has a strong foundation. So you can see why this goes across any size company, right? We also provide focused offerings. We don't try to be everything to everyone, and being focused in what we offer and being intimate with the solutions that we offer allows us to provide you with the highest levels of service and support. Just to get an idea of the solutions that we provide, we started with Microsoft and Symantec. Microsoft for then server and OS solutions, licensing of those as well. We've moved with the times, as Microsoft has also offered additional solutions, primarily Microsoft Office 365, supplying licensing for that and also migration, as well as Azure solutions. Symantec, we primarily focus with them on endpoint protection and data protection with backup exec. Now they have split, but then Symantec and Veritas were one company. So we had started with, you can say with Veritas at the same time, but since the split, we offer their solutions as well as a long-standing partner. NetApp for storage solutions, Cisco, I don't think that name needs any introduction, but primarily networking solutions, switches and wireless with Cisco, and at sometimes enterprise firewalls. HPE Enterprise for servers and switching as well as wireless solutions. Palo Alto for they are called a network security company, and for good reason. They are a premier enterprise class firewall solution, and they do much more. Maybe our next presenter will touch on that. And our last addition has been Sophos, which incidentally would be the next webinar we embark on. So we're going to focus now on Palo Alto Networks and how they help us thwart these 6 assassins that we've identified in the stages of a cybersecurity attack. So I'd like to bring to the fore Rolando Pichardo from Palo Alto Networks. Rolando?
Yes, good morning. Can hear you very well. Parker, how are you?
Hi, good morning, Rolando. Nice to have you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Great. So going to share my screen right now. First of all, thank you for the invite, and thank you for the rest of the attendees that are here on the session. I'm going to talk about the cyber kill chain and basically how Palo Alto Networks help our businesses to basically prevent an attack in every stage of the cyber kill chain. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen real quick. All right, you see my screen there?
Yep, we up.
So, seeing the screen.
Okay, great. So I can start right away. As I mentioned, thank you all for joining to the session. This is going to be very interesting, and I really hope that you gain some knowledge on this. And well, just let me know if you have any questions. We're going to have a Q&A at the end of the session to clarify any doubts that you may have. Okay, so let's begin with the agenda. Basically, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the cyber kill chain. What is the cyber kill chain? The 6 stages of an attack life cycle, and then most importantly, of course, how does Palo Alto Networks help disrupt the cyber kill chain? At the end of the session, we're going to have a Q&A so that we can clarify any questions or doubts that you might have. Okay, so what is the cyber kill chain? Basically, this was let's just say a step-by-step methodology that encompasses every step that an attacker usually takes when an attack comes in. Basically, if we think about advanced persistent threats right now, all of these threats are carefully crafted. I would say very sophisticated in its nature. Basically, all of the attackers are, just going through each of these stages until the last stage, which is pretty much the achievement of the objective that the attacker might have, which can be different things. This was originally developed by Lockheed Martin. I think it was 2011. Yes, I think it is 2011, definitely. Then we saw, and this is pretty much like, I wouldn't say the cyber kill chain itself, but probably you are familiar with the MITRE ATT&CK framework. The MITRE ATT&CK framework pretty much models each of these stages as well with additional steps. but it models it with basically with all of the behaviors that we might see in each of these stages, which is what they call tactics, techniques, and procedures. This by no means is the same as the cyber kill chain, even though it intertwines each of these methods in some way, shape, or form. So basically, the cyber kill chain encompasses, it is usually 7 steps, but we can actually do the second step in a single step, basically. And I'm going to explain why probably in the next slides. Okay, so the first step is always the recon stage, the reconnaissance stage. And this is where the attacker does the research, identifies its victim, and it starts to select targets. This is where the attackers look at vulnerabilities. It can look at, let's just say, for example, for social engineering techniques, looking at LinkedIn profiles, for example, looking at emails, just to get information from the victim itself. Basically, as part of that process, the attacker usually harvests credentials. For example, if the organization has had their credentials leaked in the dark web, just to put an example there, probably gathering information such as email addresses to target a phishing attack, just to put some examples there. But this is the stage where the attacker does all the recon, starts to gather all the information. Of course, the more information the attacker has, the more sophisticated and more convincing the attack could be. And obviously, the more successful could be. The likelihood of success increases in that stage when we have enough information, when the attacker has enough information. The second step is weaponization and delivery. And if we look at the cyber kill chain originally, we see the second step as weaponization and the third stage as delivery. We are basically combining both of these pretty much because of the following. Usually, this is where the attacker starts to craft their malware. Usually it's a ransomware, it could be command and control, but this is usually to gain remote access within the organization. It crafts this with the exploit that they want to exploit against, deliver a payload, and then of course, the delivery stage is pretty much the transmission of such payload to the target. So this is why I'm combining weaponization and delivery into the second step, because of course, in order to be weaponized, it needs to be delivered as well. So that's why I'm combining these two in a single step. The third one, and this is where the attacker has already weaponized his malware and has sent this to a target. This is where the weapon code is triggered, and this is where the exploit comes in, the exploiting endpoints, exploiting applications or vulnerable systems. And this is where the attacker starts to gain full hold within the organization. The fourth step here is the installation. And this is more of a persistent step, most likely. In this case, this is the stage where the weapon or the attacker installs a backdoor on a target system. Usually a backdoor could be, for example, gaining command and control activity. It could be, for example, creating scheduled tasks on the endpoint by basically just making sure that the malware runs probably in a silent way. No, probably it's not taking any type of malicious activity or taking actions. This could be also different techniques in order to gain persistence within the organization. It could be also generating a register key just to create a startup program. This is a very common, I would say this is the most common way to gain persistence within the organization. And this is also where between the third step and the fourth step also, this is where the attacker starts to do things like lateral movement in order to, then again, allowing persistence within the organization. The fifth step, and this is where the attacker, the command and control step, of course, this is where the attacker is already established communication with their infected hosts, basically by providing remote access within the network, inside the target's network. And in that step, obviously the attacker is taking control of the organization, and this is where the attacker can perform an additional malicious activity. That would be, for example, running a ransomware or deploying a ransomware within the organization, which could definitely have a huge impact within your environment. And the last step, of course, is the actions of an objective. Basically, once the attacker gains command and control, they can actually deploy, run malware, they can exfiltrate credentials, they can do several things. They can exfiltrate data, exfiltrate sensitive data, they can encrypt the information, and basically take in the actions that they want to take depending on the objective of the intrusion. Just to put this as an example, I'm going to probably talk about a very common attack, which is phishing. It usually starts on the following things. Basically, the attacker harvests social media information or email addresses. Basically, by gathering that information, they can also send either a phishing or spear phishing to a particular employee. This is also where, and if we look at what we have exposed on the internet, basically public IP addresses, domains, certificates, public web servers. This is where the attacker also probes the attack surface in search for vulnerabilities. So that's two examples of how the reconnaissance step takes place. The second one, which is weaponization and delivery, this is where, as I mentioned, the attacker starts to craft its malware. In this example, the attacker crafts a phishing campaign and then sends that to a target, whether it would be I'd say a phishing attack, basically by sending that to multiple employees, or probably a spear phishing by sending that to a single employee or probably an executive, which is the most common target within the organizations. And in this case, since this user receives this phishing link, probably they click the link and then the endpoint gets compromised, which is the third step that takes place. When the endpoint gets compromised, this is where the host gets exploited. The system starts to download and execute some malicious files. And this is where the endpoint security solutions can definitely take place by preventing malware from running, malicious malware, malicious activity from running on the endpoint. Then the fourth step, when the attacker starts to gain its foothold, it starts to download additional malicious files and probably can get to install some other processes in order to gain persistence. For example, this is the step where attacker starts to install red team tools like CobbleStrike in order to generate the fifth step, which is command and control. This is another example here. The fifth step on command and control, this is where the attacker starts to gain its foothold and, of course, control of the endpoints that were compromised in the first place. Just keep in mind that this traffic is usually encrypted, so that's why it's extremely important to enable things like SSL decryption on your next-gen firewalls in order to scan that traffic and know if there is something malicious inside of that traffic. But it also uses covert channels like DNS. Of course, DNS is a protocol that we use on a day-to-day basis. It's very critical to every environment for it to work properly. So attackers are usually using things like DNS to perform command and control. More often, right now, attackers are also using encrypted DNS in order to gain its foothold. And then the last step in this example, in this case, of course, since this attacker probably gained its foothold by phishing, created command and control activity, then the attacker begins to take actions to fulfill its objective. For example, if it's a ransomware, probably you will see the business disruption, but you can also see data exfiltration. For example, in the ransomwares, right now, attackers are using double extortion, for example, by encrypted data, but also exfiltrating data so that the organization pays not only to recover the data, but to prevent that data from being public in the first place, from getting public in the first place. So those are, then again, examples of these stages of an attack life cycle. And well, just to reiterate here, in each of these steps, we can definitely take some proactive actions in order to prevent that from happening, okay? So what kind of actions can we take? And this is pretty much before getting into Palo Alto Network solutions and products and all sorts. But if we see the recon stage, it's very, it's difficult to identify since we are not seeing threats probably on the network, okay? We're not seeing any type of alerts or anything. We're not having or taking any actions whatsoever since the attacker has not started the attack as of yet. Probably we can see some attackers probing vulnerable systems, doing some vulnerability scanning, things like that, in order to use an exploit or an exploit kit crafted to that particular server. For example, if we have a web server, public web server, right? If we have a web server that is vulnerable against Log4j, this is where the attacker actually takes a look at that and then starts to craft its malware in order to exploit that particular vulnerability that is, I would say, exposed in our environment. The next 4 stages can be highly automated. With this, I mean that we can take control, we can take actions of these 4 stages. And this is pretty much because this is where we start to see activity both on the endpoints and in the network. The first stage, which is weaponization and delivery, we might see, for example, emails with a phishing link or emails with malicious content. We can see things like network traffic flowing through the organization. We can see things like, for example, a user clicking on a link that it tends to be phishing. Things like that. This is where we can definitely see something, and this is where we can definitely take action. The next 2 steps, which is host exploitation and installation, this is extremely important on the endpoints itself, right? Because if we see, let's just say, an attacker, a user clicking on a link, it downloads a file, the file then executes directly on the endpoint. This 3rd and 4th step are actually the steps that are taken usually on the endpoint. So that's why it's also important to provide a robust endpoint security solution, not only by providing prevention capabilities, but also by providing detection and response capabilities, which is what the market calls right now as EDR, or endpoint detection and response. And then the last step, basically the command and control, is definitely visible on the network. If we have, let's just say, a next generation firewall looking at all the traffic, and then with that, basically looking at, let's just say, DNS requests, looking at malicious activity, we can definitely even alert or block or prevent that activity in the first place. So if you see, we cannot take so many actions in the first and the last step because, of course, the attacker has not crafted his attack yet on the first step, and then on the last step, it could be it could be too late in order to take action. So the most important actions and the most immediate ones are going to be between the step 2 and step 5 within the attack life cycle. So without further ado, basically, how do we stop these attacks from happening in the first place? We have seen an evolution in the security market, and we have seen that throughout many, many years, of course. We saw the first step in that evolution when the traditional antivirus basically was obsolete. Then we saw different vendors, different security solutions adding machine learning or artificial intelligence in order to stop threats on its behaviors or on its patterns instead of signatures, which is pretty much by identifying known malware. So it is also important to bring these capabilities to other layers, to other components in the organization, such as the network, particularly in the next generation firewall. So the network security right now requires a new approach, a different approach to stop unknown threats. The first one is, of course, by harnessing the power of artificial intelligence. Palo Alto Networks has, I would say, a very unique strategy in the market, which is pretty much consists of the following. There is a very important component that we have in our portfolio, which is WildFire. WildFire is the sandboxing capabilities that we have in our next-gen firewall. But we created WildFire, I would say it was around 2008, and we used WildFire in order to gather threat intelligence. That threat intelligence is very useful as of today in order to better understand how attackers behave, how each attacks have its own patterns, and then with that, using these AI and machine learning capabilities in order to learn from that, but also using that to prevent unknown threats in the first place. So that is why it's important that we use machine learning and AI capabilities also in the network, which is in the next generation firewall in this case. The second one, of course, is analyze traffic as attacks unfold. Visibility is extremely important here. This is extremely important to, let's just say, using things like SSL decryption, understanding the applications that are used in the network, understanding which users are using these applications, and then with that, obviously applying policies in order to prevent that from happening in the first place. And then the third thing is running these machine learning and signatures and this combination of different engines, so to speak, in order to prevent faster, in order to use these the combination of these different capabilities as layers in order to prevent more threats in line in the next generation firewall. So this is extremely important to understand basically how do we do how do we basically use our different capabilities in order to prevent threats in each of these stages. So Palo Alto Networks, as of today, has a very wide portfolio. We have been, I would say, mostly known or recognized as the next generation firewall leader. Actually, we created the next generation firewall back in 2005. But as of today, we have three different, I would say, platforms, three different security platforms. The first one, of course, is what you already know, which is the next generation firewall. And the second one, which is Cortex, which is what we call the SecOps or the SOC platform. There's a third one, which comprises cloud security, which is Prisma Cloud, but I'm not going to talk about that one. Basically, I'm going to focus on two parts of our portfolio, the next generation firewall and its subscriptions, and of course, Cortex, which is our security operations platform, the SOC platform specifically. So if we look at the first step, which is Recon, we have a solution that is called Cortex Expanse. So Cortex Expanse, probably you have heard of the attack surface. Basically, attack surface is my domains, my public domains, IP addresses, public IP addresses, certificates, cloud services, remote users. Those are the things that can encompass my my attack surface. And this is what the attacker is seeing from the outside. So basically, Expanse gives us the visibility about what is happening outside so that we can basically take action in each of these public assets that are part of the organization. Then if we see the second, third, fourth, and the fifth stage, we can see these little boxes here. These are the security subscriptions that we apply in our next generation firewall. We see advanced threat prevention, which is our IPS capabilities. Advanced wildfire, which is our sandbox, advanced URL filtering, which is for basically URL filtering or content filtering on websites, so to speak. And then, of course, DNS security, which is for scanning and preventing malicious DNS activity. Okay. The other piece, which is here, is Cortex XDR. As I mentioned, the third and fourth step, it's usually happens on the endpoint. So that's why it's extremely important to have capabilities on the endpoint that help us prevent the different behaviors in the endpoint itself. So this is where Cortex XDR comes in, and we combine different capabilities such as prevention, basically by using machine learning capabilities, but also detection and response within the endpoint, which is what the basically the industry calls EDR. And those are the capabilities that we're going to see with much more details in the next slide. So the first one, which is on the Recon side of things, is Cortex Expanse. As I mentioned, basically what the attack surface is in the organization, everything that is exposed outside of it, basically everything that the attacker is taking a look at, basically all the things that the attacker can take a look, like cloud environments, cloud assets, internet-facing assets like public IP addresses, domains, certificates. If you're using IaaS, for example, Azure, GCP, these type of cloud services, usually we don't identify what type of deployments we have there. If we have deployed workloads and all that, obviously that's also part of our attack surface. At the same time, every externally facing on-prem assets, things that you have probably in the DMZ that is exposed to the internet, things like web service, for example. If you have, let's just say, internet assets, like then again, cloud services, this is also part of the attack surface. Remote workers, if you have, let's just say, any third party that is also probably doing business within the organization, that is also part of the attack surface, because let's just say that the organization is protected against XYZ attack, okay? Or it has different capabilities to be protected. But let's just say there's a third party that doesn't have enough security or doesn't have enough protection. There could be an attack taking place on the third party that could, I would say, move to your organization through a site-to-site VPN, just to put an example there. But that's just one of the many examples of why it's important to continually assess the attack surface in order to basically understand how exposed these assets could be, and then with that, taking action. For example, if we have, let's just say if we have a web server vulnerable against Log4j, it's important to see that that particular web server has that vulnerability, because that's something that could, I would say, have value to the attacker. Basically, by using that as a covert channel, basically by getting and taking action on that vulnerability, they can definitely gain foothold within the organization. So one of the, as I mentioned, one of the products that we have in order to prevent the recon stage is basically Expanse. The next ones are going to be focused on the next generation firewall and the different security subscriptions. As we know, Palo Alto Networks has different flavors of the next generation firewall. The one that is most common, of course, is the hardware-based firewall, the PA series. We have different models depending on the organization size, depending on the network size, of course, and the type of deployment. We can recommend different models here. We also have the software-based firewall, which is the virtual firewall for private cloud. This is, say, VMware, Hyper-V, to put examples there, but also for public cloud. If we look at GCP, if we look at Azure, if we look at AWS, we can definitely deploy virtual firewalls in those environments. We also have the CU series, which is the containerized firewall, which is deployed with containers. Specifically, if we have Kubernetes, if we have Docker deployments, we can definitely deploy a containerized firewall within those containers in order to scan the traffic that is flowing, let's just say, east-west or between each of the container nodes, but also outside of the container, which is north-south traffic. But we also have the firewall as a service, so to speak, which is Prisma Access. This is what the industry calls SASE, Secure Access Service Edge. We have a very interesting product that I really like, which is Prisma Access. And this is pretty much like a firewall as a service that is offered as a SaaS. By the most common use case on Prisma Access is basically providing secure remote access to the remote employees. But what I wanted to focus on this slide is that in each of these different flavors of the next generation firewall, we also have different security services. We're going to talk about advanced threat prevention. We're going to talk about advanced URL filtering, advanced WildFire, and DNS. We also have different other subscriptions that are pretty much for assessing and looking at IoT devices, looking at different threats that are, let's just say, spawned across the different IoT devices within the organization. We also have DLP, which is pretty much for preventing data exfiltration, or if you have sensitive information within the environment, basically the next generation firewall can scan the traffic and take action on, let's just say, different information that could be probably sensitive to the organization. We also have SAP Security, which is for basically looking at risk on SaaS apps like Office 365 or Google Workspace, and basically by providing security to these cloud services using DLP, using malware capabilities or anti-malware capabilities in order to prevent threats inside the SaaS applications. We also have Global Protect, which is for remote access VPN, and of course SD-WAN, which is for basically using the different aspects of a link like jitter, latency, packet loss in order to use policies to better route the traffic to, let's just say, the better link for internet access. If you have quick internet access to Office 365, basically SD-WAN can route all the traffic dynamically based on its link performance. And we can also do things like a hub and spoke approach, different topologies around SD-WAN. But as I mentioned, I'm going to focus on 4 different capabilities, which is advanced threat prevention, advanced WildFire, advanced URL filtering, and DNS security. So these are the capabilities that we see then again in our network security platform and our next generation firewalls. But if we look at each of these capabilities, let's take a look at the advanced threat prevention. So we have obviously the next generation firewall, and we can use the different subscriptions in order to add more security capabilities to the next generation firewall. The advanced threat prevention is pretty much the IPS, the intrusion prevention system capabilities within the next generation firewall. Probably you are familiar with threat prevention. This is how the subscription was originally called. We used to use only signatures when threat prevention came in. Then we released advanced threat prevention. And what we did is that we started to add machine learning in the firewall in order to prevent more unknown threats. And with that machine learning, we started to use different models in order to then again detect unknown threats in the first place. So there are different things that we are using here. The first one is, of course, signatures. And the second one is the machine learning models. What we do here is that we are continuously improving these machine learning models, these behavioral models. These behavioral models are downloaded to the firewall, and these behavioral models are also using different techniques like injection attack detector, which is for looking at advanced techniques, basically on unknown threats like SQL injection. Particularly unknown threats are not using the typical SQL injection that we see nowadays. Basically, they are using different techniques and then go into the SQL injection against web threats is also extremely important. So that's why we are using these capabilities within the inline machine learning models.
Orlando.
We also have the ability, yes.
All right, Sarquin. I just wanted to point out on the machine learning that that's a feature that's more of a proactive approach to threat prevention. Instead of waiting for signatures or waiting for signatures to be developed for something that's already existing, machine learning is actually capable of identifying, just like a regular person, well, not as good as a person, but in the same vein, that's the idea that it identifies something even before signatures have been developed for it. You know, so it's very advanced. He's speaking over it, but it's a very advanced technology to be residing on a box sitting in your infrastructure.
Correct. Thank you, Tarquin, for the intervention. So yes, as Tarquin mentioned, definitely by using these inline machine learning models, we have the ability to stop unknown threats in line of the firewall without depending on any verdict or any signatures to take action there. So other examples that we can that we use and leverage the machine learning models, we see that there is certain traffic that can be detected, like unknown TCP or unknown UDP, for instance, and we scan that unknown traffic in order to look at its behavior. So if it has, let's just say, suspicious DNS entries or suspicious DNS requests like domains or DGAs, dynamically generated domains, we can take a look at that and obviously take in action on that particular behavior before the command and control takes place. Those are the many examples. Those are one of the many examples that we can that we use in order to basically prevent threats and leverage the inline machine learning back on the firewall. This is pretty much what we do with the advanced threat prevention. Another important thing is that advanced threat prevention comes, I would say, crowdsourced from our threat intelligence, our Unit 42 team, which is our consulting services team, and also from Advanced Wildfire, which is our sandbox. And this is where the sandbox is also extremely important. There are some threats that could be hidden in the organization. For example, there are some threats that could use a time bomb, which is pretty much executing the threat but not taking any action until XYZ comes in or until a specific time frame. There are so many actions that the attacker takes in order to stay hidden or basically to evade certain defenses. So highly invasive malware also requires more in-depth analysis, and this is where definitely sandbox technologies comes in. So that's why we're using different techniques also on Advanced Wildfire, basically by detecting, let's just say, memory resident malware. There's also a technique that the attackers use in order to stay hidden, and it's that they use memory resident malware. So malware starts running in memory, but it doesn't take any single action until I would say the attacker starts to or wants to take that action particularly. So For the advanced wildfire specifically, we have different techniques and different capabilities. This is also, obviously, this is all done in our cloud. So basically, all of the threats that can be unknown to the firewall gets uploaded to advanced wildfire and more in order to do a more in-depth analysis. Basically, these wildfire capabilities, we combine different things like static analysis by looking at threat intelligence, looking at how that threat basically looks at, let's just say in a static way before it executes. And then we also use dynamic analysis, which is allowing that threat to execute and then uncovering any malicious or suspicious behavior. With that, we use different techniques. We use the intelligent runtime memory analysis, which is pretty much to scan the memory within the sandbox and then taking a look at what could be happening, any inputs or outputs that might have that particular process. And then with that, looking at, let's just say, probably some possible outputs that can indicate malicious activity. We do also the malware family fingerprinting, which is pretty much categorizing each of the malwares in its different families in order to understand its behavior, in order to basically tag its behaviors. So for example, if we see a thread that has a rapid read and write within the disk, that could indicate a ransomware. If we see a thread that is rapidly encrypting or modifying files, that definitely could indicate a ransomware. Just to put some examples there. We have also dependency emulation. Dependency emulation is that you probably have seen that there are some cases where you execute a process and you need a DLL to execute that process. You need a library to execute that process. So basically, we do the analysis of the dependencies. We bring those dependencies back to the wildfire in order to do the sandbox and in order to successfully execute that possible, the suspicious process. So with that in mind, then again, we'd use different techniques. So once we have a verdict in our sandbox, that verdict gets I would say immediately downloaded to the firewall so that the firewall also learns from it and takes action, I would say proactively within the network. So that's pretty much what we have in advanced wildfire. Then we have URL filtering. When we see the traditional URL filtering solutions, it would be proxies, or it would be, I would say the URL filtering databases that we have sometimes in our next-gen firewalls, we see different problems. The first one is that if we rely only on the databases, basically, the URL filtering databases that have each of these websites categorized like, let's just say adult, let's just say the networking, let's just say social media, those websites are going to be categorized, but there's something that's happening within the advanced persistent threats, and it's that when attackers are crafting an attack that uses URLs, basically those URLs are not dynamically, I would say, updated within databases. It usually takes around 24 to 48 hours to add a URL to a URL filtering database. So within that time frame, it's also important to take a look at those threats because this is unknown web traffic, certainly. So that's why it's important to just take a look at the unknown websites and obviously looking at each of the, I would say, components that are part of a website. And then again, usually using only URL databases to block web threats is pretty much like using an antivirus because I'm depending on the URL filtering database and I need categorization in order to prevent threats. So what we are doing with the advanced URL filtering is that we are definitely using the URL filtering database, obviously to stop the known, to categorize each of the websites so that you can apply policies either by allowing or blocking certain URL categories or website. But we're also adding the machine learning to the advanced URL filtering capabilities. How does it work? Basically, we look at unknown websites, right? So let's just say a user starts to browse and then there's a website that is categorized as unknown. We look at several things. First of all, where is that website hosted? We look at the autonomous names, the autonomous zones, particularly for the routing. I would say BGP, particularly autonomous systems. And we also take a look at the public IP address of that particular web server. So if we see, for example, let's just say an attacker is using Office 365 as a covert channel for a phishing link. The user clicks on that link and it thinks that it's Office 365. However, if we look at the public IP address of that website, if we see when that website was created, and if we see the autonomous systems for BGP or routing for that particular website, we can see that not all of these elements do not point directly at Microsoft. So that means that there could be something suspicious. We can also see the content of that website. So for example, if the user is usually browsing to Office 365, we can definitely see how the login is. And then let's just say the user also tries to browse to another website that is not Office 365, and then that login is also similar to the other one. So those are the things that we take a look at, basically by looking at these different elements of the website. We can categorize this website from unknown to phishing, for example. And with that in mind, this is where we, just take action on those unknown websites. Then again, you have known websites, which are usually categorized on the PanDB URL filtering, but you also have unknown websites which need to be dynamically categorized in order to prevent more threats. So this is these components of advanced URL filtering help us do that to prevent any malicious or suspicious activity, particularly on the second stage, which is delivery. In that very same example, let's just say a user clicks on a link, that traffic flows through the firewall, and if we don't have things like advanced URL filtering, that link could be something unknown, like a phishing link. So that traffic will flow through the firewall and it probably will not take any type of action. So by combining the URL filtering capabilities, by using the URL filtering capabilities, we can take a look at that website, basically by using every single content of that particular website in order to categorize it. And then with that in mind, we can definitely take action inline in that particular traffic. So that's one example for advanced URL filtering. The third one is DNS. So if we look at DNS, basically we use DNS in every infrastructure, right? It is, I would say, critical for our environment to work, basically by resolving IP addresses to names. This is how we basically know google.com is 8.8.8.8, for example. And obviously, when we see our technology stack, mostly on security stack, there are usually no technologies that are actually analyzing the DNS request in real time. Usually we have a firewall, which is taking action on traffic, but it's not scanning the DNS traffic itself. Obviously, DNS is a traffic that we cannot block in the first place because it's extremely critical for an organization to work, for an operation to work. And obviously, we allow that traffic. So attackers, what they are seeing is that, of course, since that traffic is always allowed and that traffic is not commonly scanned or analyzed, then attackers are actually using DNS. For example, they are using DNS for data exfiltration. They are actually using DNS requests or sending DNS requests to their server. And within those DNS requests, they are actually sending chunks or pieces of particular sensitive information. Another thing is command and control. Usually every command and control activity starts by DNS requests. It starts with DNS requests. So then again, those are two examples of how DNS is being used as of today within attackers. And we also have the ability, of course, to scan DNS traffic within the next generation firewalls. We have different capabilities for this. Basically, we look at DNS traffic, we categorize DNS traffic, let's just say if it's @ domains, if it's DGA domains, which are dynamically generated algorithm domains. We can take a look at DNS tunneling. We can take a look at things like command and control, many other categories on DNS traffic. So then, of course, it's extremely important to, and again, scan that traffic. Another thing is that, as I mentioned at the beginning, attackers are also using encrypted DNS or DNS over HTTPS, which is what's commonly or usually called. So the firewall also has the ability, our next generation firewall has the ability to decrypt the DNS request on encrypted DNS. And then, of course, since it's decrypted, we can take a look at DNS request itself and then take an action if it's something malicious. So that's pretty much DNS security. We have different.
It looks like we may have lost Rolando for a bit there, folks. Just going to try and contact him to see if we can bring him back on. Give us a few minutes, a few seconds. Guys, while we wait on Rolando, I just wanted to make a point as I have it in mind from actually his earlier slides, where we were talking about the visibility into the stages of the attack. So we know that reconnaissance there's not much visibility there. It's like somebody walking past your house and you're inside. You don't necessarily know that somebody's walking outside of your house or driving in the street looking at your house and surveilling your residence, right? But the other 5 stages, right, and in particularly the 4 in the middle, allow us to take action or gives us the opportunity to take action before things get to the critical phase with the objective being reached. And I think it's important for us to take note of that if we are careful in addressing or outfitting our infrastructure with the right tools for those 4 stages where we have visibility, it puts us in a much better position to thwart an attack. As Rolando had shown, the last stage is really a manual exercise, but we can leverage tools that gives us a lot of automation, such as the Palo Alto Networks solutions, to provide us with a comprehensive protection strategy. All right, I see Rolando is back on.
Yes, I'm back. Apologies for
Okay.
that. All right.
Great,
So I'm
fantastic.
back. Yes. Okay. So I think, well, let me go back to DNS security.
No,
So
the
as I mentioned-
slide that you're on was where we kind of lost you. So if you could start with
Okay.
this slide, that would be great.
Okay, great. So as I mentioned, the way that we do DNS security, basically we combine different techniques and we categorize the DNS request on each of these categories. There are some others, of course, but I'm just going to show some examples here. As I mentioned, there are high risk domains. For example, if we have proxy avoidance domains, this is very common for, let's just say, if users are avoiding proxy or web security solutions with using things like Ultraserve, using things like Tor, for example, which usually opens a tunnel within the organization. And then, of course, from there, they can basically evade proxy technologies. There are many things like newly registered domains or strategically aimed domains, which is when attackers are generating, let's just say, Google1.com, and then use that domain in an attack 3-6 months later. This is usually attackers use this because there are when we scan DNS, we also take a look at when that DNS name was created, so that we can understand if this is a new domain, if it's a newly registered domain, or if it's a domain that has been created, let's just say, for quite a while, and then the attacker used that for malicious purposes. There are also covert channels, things like DNS tunneling. Usually, for example, on command and control, DNS tunneling is very common, usually by encrypting DNS traffic, and then with that, taking actions on the endpoint. There's also DNS infiltration or exfiltration, sorry. DNS exfiltration is basically by exfiltrating chunks or pieces of data within the DNS requests. And then there's also ultra slow DNS tunneling, which is pretty much just sending small pieces of DNS requests in little parts of it so that the attacker gain its foothold. So then again, there are different techniques and capabilities we apply on the next generation firewall in order to scan malicious DNS traffic. So coming back to the 6 stages, and I'm going to put this in context of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Probably you are familiar with it, but the MITRE ATT&CK framework was created by the MIT. And the purpose of the MITRE ATT&CK framework is to basically model or categorize the threats or attackers in tactic, techniques, and procedures, which are pretty much behaviors of attacks. And the reason why they created this is because, first of all, we need to prevent threats not only based on signatures, but also learn from its behaviors and prevent its behaviors. But at the same time, when we look at alerts, when we look at events, we need to also take a look at its behavior to better understand what is happening in the organization. So that's why the MITRE ATT&CK was created at that moment. So putting this into the MITRE ATT&CK framework perspective, we can see different techniques and procedures. So we're going to start an example with initial access. Initial access is the weaponization and delivery of an attack. And for example, here, the user can be compromised by clicking a phishing link on email. So the advanced URL filtering capabilities that I was talking about can help you prevent the attack in that stage by basically analyzing the web traffic. And if the user clicks on that phishing link, then of course the firewall can take an action on that traffic. The second one is execution. So this is where advanced WildFire comes in. We can definitely take a look at any malicious code or execute a malicious code safely on a sandbox, so that from there we learn from these behavioral models, and we can also get its indicators of compromise or IOCs, so that we can take a look at that on the firewall. We can also use the Cortex XDR agent, which is our anti-malware solution, in order to prevent those files from getting executed. So if there's something malicious, then of course the Cortex XDR agent can definitely take action. The third step, which is command and control, we can definitely take a look at command and control activity inline on the firewall by using advanced threat prevention. And at the same time, if the attacker has already gained its foothold, let's just say the attacker wants to move laterally within the network. They want to move from their user VLAN or user zone to the critical servers zone or DMZ zone, to put examples there. They can definitely start to do lateral movement in order to gain persistence in the organization. So the advanced threat prevention capabilities within the next-gen firewall can help you prevent that. And last but not least, the exfiltration of DNS traffic. So in this case, the attacker had gained its foothold, created command and control activity, started to gain lateral movement, but then it started to exfiltrate data from DNS or started to gain additional activities from DNS traffic. So this is where the DNS security comes in. So if we take a look at this slide, basically our strategy with our next generation firewall is using these different layers, these different capabilities in order to stop the threats in every step of the threat lifecycle. Last but not least is the Cortex XDR agent. As I mentioned, the third and fourth step are critical to then, of course, preventing that cyber kill chain. But the Cortex XDR agent is quite special for that. And the reason why I say quite special is because if we see the next generation firewall, we can definitely stop threats in the network, but it's also important to have controls on the endpoint in order to prevent that malware execution. So in our case, we provide 4 different capabilities with our Cortex XDR agent. The first one is, of course, the prevention side of things. Of course, we can definitely prevent threats by using the next-gen anti-malware and the different capabilities around detection and response. So the first step is also prevention. Is always prevention, sorry. The second step is basically monitoring or seeing everything that might be, let's just say, suspicious to the anti-malware solution. And with suspicious, I mean that there are some threats that the anti-malware is not designed to stop. Okay, so that's why EDR solutions came in to the industry, because we need to have these monitors. We need to have telemetry from the endpoints, gather that telemetry, looking at the alerts, at the different intelligence, at the different incidents, and then with that, provide a response. So the second step is detecting. Okay, so what I mean with detect is that we use these different telemetries on the endpoint, gathering things like process execution, registry keys, IP addresses, every outside or inside communication to the endpoint, every inbound or outbound communication to the endpoint. Basically everything that is happening on the endpoint, we gather that as telemetry, and then we bring that into alerts. So if there is something suspicious, the security team will be able to take a look at that incident and provide a response. So that's pretty much the detection side of things. The third one is to investigate. So the idea with these alerts and these incidents is that you can also have a clear picture of how the attack came into place, basically by looking at the root cause analysis, basically by looking at the timeline analysis to see the first steps and obviously the last step that the attack took place, or the attacker took, or the malicious skills took on the endpoints. We also have the abilities to perform threat hunting. Threat hunting is by looking at, let's just say, indicators of compromise. Let's just say you want to search for every endpoint that initiated an outbound communication to a suspicious IP address. Let's just say you want to search for every endpoint that executed the process. Those are the things that we can do in the investigation side of things. Then the fourth one, which is the response, with the Cortex XDR agent, we can provide responses such as isolating an endpoint, blocking an IP address, blocking a process, deleting a process. We can do several things in order to proactively respond against threats. So in all, that's pretty much what I wanted to present in this. I hope that this content is extremely valuable to you, and I'll open the board for a Q&A if you have any questions or doubts. Yeah, I just saw a question. Going to reply right now. So someone's asking if the Cortex XDR agent works as protection at the endpoint. Yes, definitely. We can definitely provide the endpoint protection capabilities by basically using behavioral models as well on the endpoint. For the Cortex XDR agent, we also provide the compensational controls, things like the management of the native firewall, things like disk encryption, things like device control, and of course, the endpoint protection side of things. We can definitely do that, and we can also add the EDR, or endpoint detection response capabilities, to the Cortex XDR agent. So yes, we can definitely take a look at that.
Okay. I see, Sean Roit, you asked how do you access pricing for the services? That'll be through us. We're Palo Alto, as you saw from the slides that I presented. We've been a Palo Alto Networks partner since 2013. So we're able to help you with those pricings or the solutions that you're looking at. Not only pricing, but also the implementation of those solutions. So you can contact us and we'll share some contact details. Actually, we can send it out in the chat. Glenn, thanks, Glenn. Sales at myicons.tt. I'll also post my contact information so you all can you can contact me as well. Again, thank all of you who are still with us for attending. And just offer a reminder of the two other sessions that we're going to, the two other sessions that we're going to be having next week, Tuesday, same time. That's the 30th. We're going to be addressing this from another perspective, from one of the other solutions. And then also on the 6th as well, solutions that we offer. And I really want to thank Rolando for taking his time. Very busy schedule. There's lots to do, but thank him for taking time to present with us. Fantastic. So again, because you're so kind to allow us to record, we'll also be making this available to allow you to review some of the information. I know it went through fairly quickly, but definitely you'll be able to review that and formalize some of the concepts that Rolando shared with us in your mind, and hopefully apply it. Look at it, use it to apply or look at your infrastructure with a critical eye, so that you can begin to identify some of those gaps, because it's really incumbent upon us to fill those gaps, to prevent those malicious actors from causing havoc in our infrastructure.